I am so I'm so crazy glad that you came here to see this session.
Crazy glad.
And I'm going to explain to you one reason why it just cheeses me off that I had to do this presentation. Okay, now here's the truth. We have competing businesses out there that give you demographic information. Some are specific to healthcare practices, some are not. But what they do is they'll come up with this data sheet of all these facts about a place. And they'll assume that when you get that data sheet, you're going to know what the crap it means. Well, let me explain something to you real briefly. Everybody wants to know first and foremost about how much competition is there. So they tell you a competition number. What they don't tell you is what the average competition numbers are. They don't say if it's a lot or a little. They do no analysis, so they just give you the facts. Other facts they give you is median household income. They'll say, here's how much people are making, as though you have some way of evaluating, is that a lot or is it a little? And how much does the median relate to the average, relate to the per capita? You see, they don't do that, and I'll tell you why. They don't know, all right? They're not demographers.
Good gravy.
Sorry, did I forget my meds again?
Very bad. I mean, no like pleasantries or welcome to the webinar or anything like that. You just started on a tirade.
Well, I'm sorry. Welcome to the webinar. I'm so glad you're here. Now, look, what we do in these, and I'm going to do it today, is I'm taking one set of statistics and I want to explain to the viewers why it's important. And today we're talking about renters versus owner-occupied housing. And you may say, well, what does that really have to do with a professional practice? Well, it has to do a lot with professional practice. And I'll hint this. Let's say you're a veterinarian, and let's say what you're really trying to do is to sell a lot of veterinary medicine. Did you know that whether people live in a home that they own or are renting makes a huge difference as to the profitability of your practice in that area? It's because the population who lives in a home they own, regardless of whether it's a single family dwelling, an apartment, condominium, duplex, mobile home, it makes a difference because the way people act toward their place of residence is vastly different if you're renting or owning. So does that all make sense? I hope so. Let's just.
It's like, did you just get finished yelling at some kids to get off your lawn, or
maybe I did?
Good.
No, you know, I just have to say honestly, this is crazy. I just love the kids on my lawn. I got kids who come out almost every day to play on my lawn, to sit on my porch because we got a nice covered porch with it. Anyway, it is. I love that. I'm just kind of pulling your chain a little bit there, Mike.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right. So, can you see that slide?
Yes, go for it.
All right. Renters versus owners. Now, the value of a person is not determined by the status of home ownership, okay? People can rent and own, they're just fine people. But it does indicate some importance to the practice, whether the people you're targeting or you're setting up your practices near are owners and renters. There's not a better or a worse, but there is a difference, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, I'm going to refer to demographics as both direct and indirect. Direct demographics are facts about the individuals that you're talking about. So their age, their income, their gender are different and will often determine things that they think about and things that they act upon. The decision making. But indirect are a little bit different. I don't know if you can see that entirely. Indirect includes the dwelling ownership, their marital status, and even their housing type. What kind of place a person lives will make a difference as to their practical application to the practice. Now, let's talk about tendencies and trends. These are not cause and effect. They're just factors that I want you to keep in mind. Now, one thing about renters, they tend, doesn't mean every single time, but they tend to have less income. Owners tend to have a little bit more. Now, renters tend to be younger, they're less permanent, and in fact, they'll stay in their residence on average, depending on the state, 3 to 5 years. Now, in some parts of the United States, they'll stay for as little as 1 year. They'll just stay for a lease of 1 year and then leave. Most of the time, though, they're spending a little more time. And in some parts of the country, it's much higher. So if you happen to be in New York, particularly in New York City, you'll be more permanent even if you're renting. Now, another fact about renters is they usually have smaller household sizes. They're more single, they're not with someone else as much, or they rarely have an extended family that is as large as what you'd find in one which is an owner-occupied home. They're generally speaking, and this sounds like it's a criticism, it's not, they're a slightly less creditworthy. People who have a single family dwelling are usually, well, I'll get into that in a second. And they also tend to have smaller or fewer numbers of children. People who own have more. Now, if you happen to be a pediatric type professional or you're serving them, it makes a huge difference whether or not you're dealing with people who are renters versus owners, as an example. Now, owners tend to be a little more affluent, and they're usually a little older. Now, that older thing is not surprising because it takes a longer time to build up creditworthiness to be able to afford a home. I should also mention, there are some places in the United States you cannot own a home. And in the urban areas, and I'll bring, Seattle, San Francisco, New York, even downtown Chicago, you just can't own because it's so remarkably expensive. Even if you make $100,000, the housing is often $600,000 or $700,000. In San Jose, it's over $1.2 million to own. So you got to have a lot of money and probably a lot of income earners to make it work. They also tend to be more permanent, and they're usually looking at a 5-year threshold. One of the reasons is because owners recognize that you can't recover the value of a home that you purchased until you build up some equity. And in most cases, the equity buildup isn't sufficiently large until you've been there 5 years. Now, in some circumstances, that's different, but you get the idea. They also usually have a larger household size. Now, the average household size, number of people living per household, is about 2.4 in the United States, but that averages owners and renters. Renters, it's usually around 2.2 people per apartment, per home, whatever is being rented. In a single family dwelling, it's going to be usually over 2.5 and often 2.7 to 2.9 people per household. And that's regardless of how much money they make. Also, they tend to have be more creditworthy because they have an asset that they're gaining. And back to life, they'll typically have more children. Now, some people say children and they get an image in their mind of little children. I'm talking about any child. In fact, people who own a home, a single family dwelling, will often have an older child, even in their 20s, living with them, and very often more than that. For some reason, it becomes more practical if you don't have to keep stepping over somebody sleeping on your hide-a-bed in the front room. I didn't mean to make a joke there. Okay, now let's talk ownership status. In large cities, about 70+% of the people in large cities, downtown areas, are renters. Nothing wrong with it, it's simply true. In the rural areas of the United States, about 80% are going to tend to be owners. But remember, this is all housing types. So if you happen to have a trailer park and people own their trailer, they are, believe it or not, in a better equity position very often than those who are renting, even something that's small. But that is something that you're going to find almost every time in a large city, lots of renters, rural area, lots of owners. And somewhere in the middle, we find suburbs and exurbs. Now, suburbs are usually set up so that they are literally neighborhoods with streets and a high number of single-family dwellings. Suburbs are not as close to the downtown as exurbs. Now, demographers are using those two terms much more freely. Used to be, you had urban, suburb, rural. Now we actually have a thing that's kind of developed into an exurb. And around the downtown area, this is actually where the people with money tend to go. And they're often planned communities. And there's definitely a chance that these exurb types are going to be older. Now, there are a couple of trends that I want you to know are going on in home ownership. I bring this up because I don't want you to think that we don't track how things are changing. They are, not only in the percentage of people who own homes or rent homes, but also what they're finding acceptable to rent. Now, one of the facts of life, and this goes for rentals, but most especially about ownership, is they're on smaller lots than they ever were before. In fact, you can almost shake hands with your neighbor out your bedroom window. Hey, Bob, how you doing? With smaller lots, they're doing that because the house itself is where people want to put their money, not in a beautiful landscaped lawn in the front or back. So the houses themselves are staying at roughly the same size over the last 5 years, but in the last 10 or 15 years, the houses actually got pretty darn big, and that's why they were referred to as the McMansion craze. Now, because of this, smaller lot lines, there's higher and higher density, more people living per square mile than there has ever been before. Part of it is planned communities. Part of it is the utilization of land, because in many, many places, the municipalities aren't allowing the development of real estate like they once were. So if you ever look at the coastal communities in the Atlantic or Pacific coast, the lots are smaller than ever before, and therefore there are more people living on them. This does create some interesting environmental issues. Now, here's another little thing you'll note. We used to have, you get on the freeway or the highway and go to work. Now we're looking at transportation hubs. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking at a light rail or train hub or a bus hub, but they are concentrating the access to regional transportation arteries like never before. But there is a trend that you should be aware of, and that is the walking and bike utilization is dramatically increasing. A lot of people are now using those. And the planned community is not necessarily planned around a central clubhouse or a golf course like it used to be. It's more transportation hub. How do I get to and from work? This has also manifested itself in a birth rate decline. There just aren't the numbers of children that there once were. In your neighborhood, in mine, we're doing fine with lots and lots of kids. But the birth rate decline is really affecting what people are doing, but it's having some strange manifestations. One of those is people are doing more in their homes than ever before. They'll actually build it with an office, a home office to start. They entertain more in their homes than they ever did. Kitchens are much more expansive. And because of that, what is a reasonable place may not be smaller, but it will have fewer people living in it because of the birth rate decline and the longevity increase. By the way, I misspelled increase in case you're wondering. Just means this: people are living longer and not moving into a retirement home at the rate they used to. The preference now, and this is a pretty serious trend demographers are tracking, is people want to stay in their own home, have somebody come in and provide them services like meals and cleaning, and they're staying in their homes longer and making them family friendly or at least senior friendly. So elevators are the rage in upscale neighborhoods, and I think that's going to increase over time. Now, everybody, we're having a special. This is on the practice site viability report. And guys, this is our biggest discount of the year, so better take advantage of it. Right, Mike?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
To get it, you go online to our Dr. Demographics order form, and it's SS19, P as in Paul, V as in Victor. Now, I'm going to predict something. Someone's going to call me up after this promotion ends and say, can I get that discount?
Scott, when does it end? Because I don't know you mentioned that.
I don't know, Mike. When is the end? Is it?
I believe it's the end of the month.
I believe it is. I think we're carrying this through the end of June. Now, that's because we have a lot of people who are going to cram in to get this. This discount kind of slipped out a little bit. We're getting a little more business than I thought we were going to get. So I'm sorry if it takes a little longer to generate a report. But here's the deal. A report that is going to be deeper, that is going to help you mitigate your risk and give you more advice than this one. It is not just a bunch of numbers. This is the analysis. And trust me, it's going to be of value to you.
The key for you doctors that you want to be ahead of the curve is to be looking at the future. And again, admittedly, it's not an easy thing to do, but I was just talking to a doctor that we were talking about those doctors that are at a stage where they kind of miss the internet boom. You know, they weren't able to sell because it was in a process of the recession and whatnot. And so they kind of missed that phase, and now they're really hurting because they're trying to sell their practices, but they have no internet following, they have no social media, they don't have a website a lot of times. And this is a similar circumstance in that that at-home services is going to bleed into professional practice as well, from dental, veterinary, for sure. And so again, it's one of those things, if you want to be ahead of the curve, keep in mind of those type of things and start exploring them. I think it'll be very, very valuable. So I want to continue talking about these owners and renters and pros and cons, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in marketing terms. And I think this is going to be valuable. Well, I hope it is. Of course it's going to be valuable. If I can get my presentation to go here. Okay. So everything that Scott said about the trends and the demographics is absolutely true. And when we talk about renters, I think a lot of us have a preconceived opinion of what that looks like. And as I've had the experience working with Scott, looking at every county in the country, renters mean something different depending on where you are. And so a lot of what I'm going to say today may or may not apply to the renters that you have in your area. A lot of times areas, especially metro areas, have renters that are the highest income, and Scott talked about that a little bit. I'm going to be more talking about suburb renters or even rural renters, which makes up a huge geographic area of this country. And probably many of you that are watching this are going to be practicing or at least targeting some of those areas for your practice. So let me just remind you, and you've seen this slide before many, many times from me, but a marketer is agnostic, meaning that if you are making that decision of that I don't want renters because of this or that, or I'm not going to focus on them, you're making a mistake, especially if you've already put down roots in an area and you find yourself in an area like you didn't order a demographic report before you bought the practice, and so you didn't know that there's a high percentage of renters in that area. And so instead of just saying I don't want any of that segment, let's talk about renters, because you either have them or you don't. You need to be agnostic. You need to take advantage of whatever the situation is that you're finding yourself in. So again, remember that a true marketer is agnostic. Now, let's talk for a second why renters are a challenge. And for those of you who don't know the gentleman on my screen here, we're going to kind of have a Parks and Recreation theme to our slides today. But these are from a marketing perspective when either I'm marketing one of my businesses or I'm helping a practice market their business in an area. These are typically the reasons why renters as a whole can be a little bit of a challenge for your practice marketing. Now, one of the challenges that I found is that usually they have kind of an anti-put down roots attitude, which impacts their loyalty. As you know, as a practice owner, loyalty is very, very important, because you may not make quite the profit or the amount that you want to with that patient the first time they come through the door. What you're going to make with them is your long-term relationship, which includes referrals, which includes the services that you provide to them, which sometimes includes multi-generation that happens. And sometimes renters don't have that attitude because they're kind of transient in where they're living. They know they're going to be somewhere else in a couple years. And so a lot of times they're not really investing their own personal loyalty capital that they have in those services, professional practices in the area. Now, another thing that's a little bit of a challenge is they will oftentimes seek a short-term deal rather than buying because of stability or personality. Now, if you've worked with me or if you've watched some of my other trainings, you know how much of an advocate I am for personality marketing, which means taking the doctor or whoever the rainmaker is in the practice and really putting them up front and becoming a personality that people can be attracted to. And that is, there's a certain psychology that goes with that, but I found marketing wise, it's a very critical piece to being successful. And a lot of times people that are renters, again, because they don't have that, we're putting down roots here, we're going to build that personality, they're just kind of chasing deal to deal. And so because of that, that can be a little bit of a challenge. And oftentimes they'll be attracted to a DSO or some of these others. Not that we don't like DSOs, we love DSOs, but they'll be attracted to that type of an offer before they'll go to a practice that's been there for a long time. Now, another thing that can be a challenge is, and we talked about, a lot of times just quite simply, they have a short lifetime value. And so if you try to respond to the above bullet point, and so you do a short-term deal, a loss leader just to get them through the door, oftentimes they're not there long enough as a patient for you to really capitalize on the profit potential with that interaction. And so because of that short lifetime value. Now, again, if you're in an area where people are renting for 5 years, that can be quite a bit different than people that are renting for a year, 18 months, something like that. So again, depends on the type of renters you have in your area. Now, another thing that's challenging is oftentimes that it costs more to market to them because of the churn rate, meaning that if you have a bank of apartments or condos or whatever in your area, you have to continue to send stuff to them, to that household, to that address, because the people that were there that you may have convinced that you're the best doctor since sliced bread, they're going to move, they're going to be gone. And so you have to start all over again in that process with the new family that's there. And that can be expensive. And in areas that have a lot of renters, or usually when I look at an area and it has greater than about 30% of renters in an area, you know that you're going to have to increase your marketing spend a little bit consistently over the months, because you're going to be marketing to them on a more consistent basis. Your direct mail campaigns, whatnot, are going to have to be a little bit more consistent. Now, the next thing is that they do not build as many community relationships. Thus, they don't refer quite as often. So they're not, again, investing in a church. They're not investing their time in a gym. They're not investing their time in some of these other things that just naturally creates opportunities for them to send referrals to you. And so if just left to their own devices, typically renters are a less referring group of patients that you can have for your practice. And that obviously can be a little bit of a challenge if that's a big piece of your new practice acquisition model. And the last thing is that sometimes, and again, this is putting renters in a box that's not fair, but sometimes when it's time for payment, they can be a little bit hard to find. And now, again, this is a certain segment of renters that are typically middle-aged to older age renters, meaning that they're never going to not be renters and they're used to that churn. Not typically the younger renters and not typically those that are in retirement age, that's just the phase of life they're in. It's kind of that middle age, 30 to 58 years old. Sometimes that can be a little hard to find when it comes to payment time. Now, let's talk about why I love renters. And the truth is, there are challenges when it comes to renters, but as a marketer, I lean towards more that I love renters, frankly, because I think it provides some opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. And especially there's a lot of doctors that just see renters as the challenges, not the opportunities. So I think if you are a smart marketer and are willing to listen to what I have about to tell you, I think you're going to love renters as well for your practice. So let's talk about the first thing. Now, the first thing is that it's really easy to get them through the door with an offer. Now, remember, we talked about that they're chasing deals oftentimes and going from thing to thing. But as long as you are planning on that and you create the right sales presentation and the right opportunity when they do come through the door, it's pretty easy to get them to walk through and to respond to that offer. And so as long as you set up your profitability model and your sales funnel and process to plan for that, it can be incredibly useful to get those people to go through the door and to keep kind of the skids greased in your practice. Keep the wheels churning when it comes to your overhead, because you can get that first initial treatment plan done with those renters in that short time. Now, the second thing I absolutely love about renters is usually they have a greater amount of work that needs to be done. Again, because they haven't done, in many cases, a long-term treatment plan with a doctor, and maybe they've been in the process of moving from one area to another, whatever it is, they haven't just had the consistency of, and again, often we're talking about dentists right now, but they have not had that consistency. Usually when they come in and they're in a position to come in, they typically have a lot more work that needs to be done. And so that you can provide them with the right treatment plan to get them back where they need to be. And it's typically more than those that have been consistent, have the stability, are seeing you every 6 months. A lot of times renters aren't that group. And so it creates some opportunity for you if you handle it the correct way. Now, the next thing I love is that there are new eyes in every household every 18 months. Now, I talked about in the challenges that is a challenge. Yes, and you do have to spend more. But in my mind, that's an incredible opportunity, because sometimes in areas that are very overwhelmingly homeowners, there just is not a lot of movement. And it can be really difficult for a new practice to move in and find success, because people are already at a practice. They're loyal. If the practices are taking care of them, it's tough to get them to leave. And so if the area is not growing very quickly and it's a mature area and filled with homeowners, sometimes that can be a tough area to break into. If there's some renters, it gives newer practices an opportunity to talk to those people, and it kind of keeps the funnel full on a consistent basis. So I think it's a great opportunity. The next thing I love is that it's easier for doctors to break into those areas with legacy practices. I don't know how many doctors I've talked to that we look at an area, it's beautiful, hits all the marks demographically, psychographically, but they are not from the area. They have no connection to the area. And I shoot straight with them and tell them that it's going to be tough for them to break in unless they do something drastic. And usually that means doing something that they don't want to do or don't want to be known for right off the bat. And so when you have renters, it's usually easier for those newer doctors to break into those areas that have those long-standing legacy practices that everybody went to, and mom and dad went to them, and grandma and grandpa went to school with them. And so it gives those opportunities for them to be successful, those new doctors. Now, here's the thing. I talked about how naturally they don't refer as well. The truth is they can be excellent referral partners for you, but you have to manage it. You have to do it the right way. You have to be very proactive in asking them and training them and showing them how to do it. Renters can be great referral opportunities, because guess what? They may be only staying in their apartment every, for 18 or 24 months or 36 months or whatever, but so is their neighbors. And so lots of times they're constantly having people move in and out around them that they can refer them to you, but you have to manage it. You have to be proactive about it. And the other part about that goes with it is they can be great reviewers as well. Again, you have to train them. You have to show them why that's important to you. You have to make that great first connection, but they can be great reviewers if you ask them to do that. Usually a little bit higher even than homeowners, and the numbers are greater because you're churning through them again every 18 months or so. Okay, so let's talk specifically just for a second about marketing to renters. Things that I would tell you if you were my brother-in-law or sister-in-law sitting across from me at the Thanksgiving Day table. These are the things that I would tell you to do if you wanted to target the segment of renters. Now, the first thing is Facebook ads, and what I call the move-in strategy, meaning that you're able to target new people as they come into an area, as they move there, as they relocate. And guess what? They're changing their Facebook status that they used to live here and now they live here. And that can be an excellent trigger for you in your marketing and your Facebook ads to target those people specifically with a new patient special or whatever. And that they are truly new people, and you're going to get to them way before the Chamber of Commerce is going to to drop off the packet with 50 other dentists and vets in it. You're going to reach them much quicker. So excellent strategy. The second thing that I would do, guess what? Facebook ads again, but I would use a geographic strategy. Typically, it's really easy to find the parts of your town, your county that has a higher percentage of renters than in other areas. And you can target that geographic area very specifically in Facebook ads. The third one, you might have guessed it, Facebook ads, but it's a psychographic strategy. Typically, renters have, at that phase of life, a different psychographic profile that's assigned to them than what other psychographic profiles are, maybe when they're later in life, where they've moved into a homeowner situation, whatever it is. And so you can target them on a psychographic basis and deliver the right message directly to them. Now, the last thing that I will recommend, well, there's two more, but one I will recommend, this is one of the rare times that I will recommend a direct mail strategy, especially if it's a pocket of recent immigrants. First generation immigrants are typically a great group. And you know, many parts of the country, immigrants will a lot of times cluster together in the same apartment complex or neighborhood or whatever. And so it's really easy to target those areas in their native language oftentimes and get them to come to the practice with an offer that you've created for them. The last one is a door-to-door strategy. Yes, I know door-to-door is a thing that you used to read your grandpa did when he was selling insurance, but a door-to-door strategy for renters can be extremely successful. There's lots of ins and outs and laws and things that you've got to follow, but can be an excellent strategy. Now, do you need help? As I went through this list of things, if any of them look like, man, I don't really know how it would apply to me or how I would deploy that in my particular practice, let me recommend a couple of things. We are starting this next month another group of dental practice professionals that want to be masters of their marketing. This includes a tremendous amount of training that you can do right there from your own office through your computer, as well as coaching by myself to help you deploy these things into your practice. So if you're interested in the Dental Practice Mastery course, please reach out to me. We've got a few seats left. You can find me by going to mike@drdemographics.com. You can go to dentalpracticeinsiders.com and get some more information on that. But you have the opportunities, you have the resources, you just have to ask. We can help you deploy these things and make sure or create a strategy so you don't have to ignore that 30% higher or lower, depending on where you're at, of renters, and you can make them become a very, very excellent profit source for your practice. Scott, what say you?
Well, Mike, I absolutely agree with everything you've said. One of the things that I'm kind of impressed by about you is you're kind of what I refer to a boots on the ground marketing guy.
Yeah.
There are people who want to talk about the theories and the analytics and stuff like that. You actually do it, and it's one of those things I just kind of wish our viewers took advantage more often for their sake.
Sure.
I think what you're offering here is kind of wonderful. And of course, I'm one of the smartest guys in the room.
Well, naturally.
So totally.
Well, when you live as many years as you've lived, I mean, you do acquire a certain amount of knowledge and experience. So my hat's off to you.
You know, I have a birthday coming up, right?
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. You know how old I'm going to be, Mike?
I don't know.
Apparently not. All right.
No, the question is, do you know how old you're going to be?
I remember, whatever. My grandkids will remind me.
Right.
Anyway, you guys, I want to thank you all for watching today, and please tell your friends and neighbors. Don't forget our special.
My gosh, seriously.
And this practice side viability thing that we've got is just kind of remarkable. Mike, do you remember
you can't afford not to do it, honestly. I know that's kind of in jest, but the truth is, if you don't know the psychographics and the demographics for your area, and you're consider yourself a marketer, you're crazy. Honestly,
crazy.
You're nuts. And with that much money that's on the line, and your family and your staff's family, and you don't know those things, man, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry that Mike went over so long, but I want you to know we'll be on. Keep it tighter next time. We had some technical issues.
Yeah.
Everybody, thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care.